At this point in Star Wars canon, Tanalorr is officially the new and only home of the Hidden Path. But how did we get here, and how will Tanalorr play into the future of the Hidden Path in Star Wars storytelling? That's exactly what I want to discuss and theorize about in this video. But before we get into the future, we have to go back into the past, before the Skywalker saga and the events of the Acolyte, prior to the Great Hyperspace Disaster, and back into the days of the Galactic Frontier. Around 200 to 232 BBY, during the days of the High Republic, the Jedi Order established a base on the planet Kobo to study a nearby stellar anomaly known as the Kobo Abyss. Though despite their efforts, all attempts to navigate the abyss ended in failure. As the Jedi Order was beginning to give up on the project, a determined Jedi Knight named Dagan Gera flew blindly into the abyss, successfully navigating the nebula using the Force, and discovered a hidden planet inside. After landing on the planet and discovering its strong connection to the Force, Gera became obsessed, vowing to create a new Jedi temple and began training Jedi initiates, with the temple serving as a bastion of the Jedi's light in the Outer Rim. Following his return to Kobo, he informed Jedi Master Santari Khri of his discovery, and the planet became a major focus for the two Jedi. Khri used the navigational data from Dagan's flight to craft compasses to safely navigate the abyss to reach the planet inside, and soon after, a Jedi temple was constructed on this new world, now known as Tanalorr. The Jedi High Council also became very curious about the planet, sending Jedi Master Appa Rancisis to the planet to determine whether or not Dagan and Santari's project, along with the planet itself, was worth being used by the wider Jedi Order. However, on the eve of Master Rancisis' visit, the planet was attacked by the Nihil. Despite the Jedi putting up a brave defense against the invaders, the High Council ultimately gave the order to abandon the planet and destroy all devices capable of navigating the abyss. Enraged at the Council's decision, Dagan fell to the dark side and betrayed the Order, killing several of his fellow Jedi over the destruction of the compasses. Due to his obsession, Dagan eventually confronted Santari Khri, who held the last remaining compass, pushing her aside with the Force to claim the device. But in a last-ditch effort, Khri severed Dagan's arm with her lightsaber, causing Gera to go unconscious. Instead of killing him, Khri believed Dagan still deserved a second chance and had his body placed in stasis inside of a Bacta tank on Kobo within the rehabilitation wing of the Jedi Forest Array facility. Following an emergence over Kobo in the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace Disaster, the Jedi present on the planet either perished in the fallout or abandoned the Kobo operation altogether, leaving Dagan Gera's body in stasis undisturbed within the Forest Array. Gera's body was eventually uncovered in 9 BBY by the Jedi Cal Kestis, untouched and preserved within the tank, where his body was left 2 centuries prior, and the two Jedi shared a vision of Gera's past, prompting Cal to awaken Gera and release him from the tank, beginning a race between the two to find Santari Khri's final compass to navigate the Kobo Abyss and reclaim Tanalorr. While we already know Dagan's motivations due to his feelings of betrayal by the Order, Santari Khri, and the Sith's rise to power in the present galaxy, Cal sees the planet as a safe haven for himself and others who stand against the Empire, potentially serving as a new home for the Hidden Path. So before we continue, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you never miss out on any of my Star Wars content. The Hidden Path and the Star Wars Jedi games are some of my favorite parts of Star Wars storytelling, so I really appreciate all of your support. Now, before we get into the history of the Hidden Path in canon, we have to answer the question, what is the Hidden Path? The Hidden Path, or simply The Path, is a secret underground network of volunteers and former Jedi that work to shelter other surviving Jedi and Force sensitives to safety following the events of Order 66 and the rise of the Galactic Empire. The Path operated through many different locations across the galaxy, smuggling its refugees through different safe houses and bases on planets like Daiyu, Mapuzo, Jabeam, and Jedha, helping the Force sensitives escape Imperial capture and providing them with new identities. So now that you know what the Hidden Path is, let's figure out where it all started, how it grew over the years, and where the story of the Path is headed, with all directions pointing towards the planet Tanalorr. Our first chronological mention of the Hidden Path occurs in 18 BBY in the Tales of the Underworld series. After a chance meeting with a surviving Jedi Padawan named Lyco Strata, Asajj Ventress makes the choice to help the young boy escape Imperial capture and secure passage off-world. During their escape, Lyco says it's been a long time since he's seen another Jedi and asks Ventress if she knows how to find the Path. As Lyco explains the Path and its purpose, he says it's rumored to have been established by Quinlan Vos, which of course piques Ventress' interest given her history with the Jedi Master. After dueling an Inquisitor that's been tracking the boy and escaping the planet together, Ventress and Lyco track down the bounty hunter Latz Razi for intel on the Path. Using that intel, the pair travel to a desert planet and are aided by a former member of the CIS military and his granddaughter, who help them reach the Path rendezvous point on the planet. But at the last second, Lyco decides to stay with Ventress instead of leaving on the shuttle. Tales of the Underworld gives us our first chronological mention of the Hidden Path and establishes Jedi Master Quinlan Vos as a founder of the network, as well as the network's first known rendezvous point in Cypher Canyon. This series also proves that there are bounty hunters aware of the path's existence, with access to intel on their movements. Though the planet Ventress and Lyko discover the path's rendezvous point on is not named in the series, it shares a striking resemblance to the planet Kobo, which could further tie the series and the game Jedi Survivor together, along with the overarching story of the Hidden Path in Star Wars media. Both planets share similar rugged terrain, rocky cliffs, deserts, valleys, and blue-teal hued natural springs, though I imagine Cypher Canyon is located on another part of the planet away from the Ramblers Reach settlement seen in the game. This unnamed planet also has one sun and what looks like a smaller planet or moon nearby, similar to Kobo's one sun and the Shattered Moon. The grandfather character says to Ventress, "At least we're far away from the Empire out here. Bad part is, the water is scarce," which could also serve as another indicator that the planet they're on is Kobo, as Kobo is located in the Outer Rim and required a complex system to provide the Ramblers Reach settlement with fresh water. Jedi Survivor establishes that the core ship of the CIS Lucrehulk Primacy crash-landed in Kobo's Viscid Bog at some point during the Clone Wars, which could further explain how this grandfather character ended up on the planet, as well as the disabled B-1 battle droids he has outside of his homestead. I also believe the planet Ventress and Lyko meet up with Razi and Highsinger on could be the planet Daiyu, first introduced in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Between the dense cityscape littered with neon and the smoky green atmosphere, these planets look extremely alike. This connection would also serve as yet another connection to the story of the Hidden Path, as the network canonically had operations on Daiyu, which we saw in the Kenobi series. Continuing the chronological story of the Hidden Path, the Bad Batch Season 3 sees the Batch team up with the bounty hunter Fennec Shand for information on M-Count and the Empire's bounty for M-Count targets, believing that Omega may be at risk. Fennec tells the Batch that she hasn't done an M-Count job herself, but she might know someone who has, which is later revealed to be Asajj Ventress. Ventress eventually tracks down the Batch on Pabu, curious about their growing concerns with M-Count, explaining that the Empire is after people who possess high midichlorian counts, or what is known as M-Count, those that can or have the potential to wield the Force. This eventually leads to Ventress testing Omega for Force sensitivity, though it's never actually confirmed whether or not Omega has a high midichlorian count or the potential to wield the Force at all. I believe the events of the Bad Batch Season 3 take place after the events of Tales of the Underworld for a handful of reasons, but the biggest is the amount of growth Ventress goes through in Tales. Ventress begins Tales of the Underworld somewhat aimless and without purpose, closed off from the world around her. Though it's not a total character regression, she seems to have put her walls back up. That is, until she meets Lyko. Without the bond that grows between Ventress and Lyko throughout the series, there's no way Ventress would have wasted her time on Pabu with Omega. Also, in Tales of the Underworld, Ventress tells Razi that she's looking to kill some Jedi and make some real money, a story I believe she might begin to use as a cover to gain intel on Jedi survivors and other M-Count targets in order to track them down and get them in touch with the path. Plus, at this point in the timeline, Ventress seems to have acquired her own ship, which we did not see in Tales. So you might ask why we don't see or get any mentions of Lyko in the Bad Batch, but that could be as simple as him being on another mission or just off-screen inside the ship. Either way, both series are confirmed to take place in the year 18 BBY. Fast forwarding 9 years into the future, our next chronological entry to the story of the Hidden Path takes place in 9 BBY in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Following the kidnapping of Princess Leia, Bail and Breha Organa reach out to Obi-Wan for help, to which he reluctantly agrees, following Bail's intel to the planet Daiyu to track down Leia. His search for Leia leads him to a shady operation run by the con artist Haja Estri, falsely claiming to be a surviving Jedi, helping those in need with safe passage off the planet. After rescuing Leia from her kidnappers and with the Inquisitors on their tail, Estri shows his true intentions, offering Obi-Wan and Leia passage off the planet to a contact on the planet Mapuzo, hinting at his connection to a larger operation. Upon landing on Mapuzo, the pair are eventually met by an Imperial officer named Tala Durith, who takes them to a safe house on the planet, introducing our characters to the Hidden Path network. We have safe houses like this throughout the galaxy, trying to link the systems. Some call it the Path. You're not the first Jedi to come through here. It all leads to Jabim, and from there, we give them new identities and get them out. Looking over carvings on the wall of the safe house, Obi-Wan recognizes the name Quinlan Vos, to which Tala confirms the Jedi Master's involvement, thus confirming Quinlan's continued efforts for the Path over the past 9 years. After Leia's capture by the Inquisitorius and escaping the clutches of Darth Vader, Obi-Wan and Tala escape to the planet Jabiim, which hosts a Hidden Path base under the leadership of Colin Roken. Through his conversations with Obi-Wan, we learn that Roken married a Jedi, and despite their efforts to hide, they were discovered by the Inquisitorius, implying that they murdered his wife, providing Roken's reason for joining the network and motivations to keep other Force sensitives from suffering the same fate. Following Leia's rescue from the Fortress Inquisitorius, our heroes return to the Jabiim base with the Empire hot on their tracks. Obi-Wan, Tala, and the other Hidden Path refugees hold off their attack, buying time to plan their escape off the planet. While our heroes narrowly make it off Jabiim with the Empire on their tail, Obi-Wan decides to sacrifice himself by confronting Vader, buying time for Roken to repair their failing ship. Thankfully, Obi-Wan's plan works, luring the attention of Vader and allowing the remaining members of the Path to finally escape. Throughout the Kenobi series, the carvings on the walls of the Hidden Path safe houses reveal many different Jedi that have passed through the network. On top of confirming Quinlan Vos' involvement, the carvings in the wall of the Jabiim base also confirm the involvement of Jedi Masters Cere Junda and Eno Cordova of the Star Wars Jedi games. At the time, their involvement was simply taken as an Easter egg for those fans willing to translate the Arabesh carvings. However, little did we know, these carvings were actually a tease of more to come. By the end of the Kenobi series, the Hidden Path's operations on Daiyu, Mapuzo, and Jabiim had all been discovered and shut down by the Empire. Luckily, there was still one other Hidden Path base operating within the network from the planet Jedha, and my headcanon is that's exactly where Roken's freighter was headed at the end of the series. We're introduced to the Hidden Path base on Jedha known as Pilgrim Sanctuary in the game Jedi Survivor, led by Master Cere Junda. Along with the help of the Narkis anchorites, Cere began collecting and preserving knowledge of the Jedi tradition in a large archive within an abandoned monastery on the planet. Throughout their work with the Hidden Path, Cere was also reunited with another Order 66 survivor, her former Jedi Master, Eno Cordova, as well as the Night Sister Merrin. Over a 2-year period, Cere, Cordova, Merrin, and the Anchorites worked alongside the Hidden Path, smuggling Path refugees through Pilgrim Sanctuary and building up the archive until the year 9 BBY, when the Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, mercenary Bode Akuna, and pilot Grease Dritus arrived with the knowledge of a hidden planet untouched by the Empire, a potential sanctuary for the future of the Hidden Path. Working with Cordova and the Jedi history held within the archive, Cal was able to retrace the steps of Dagan Gera and Santari Khri, locating the final compass needing to navigate the Kobo Abyss and dueling the fallen Jedi in the process. Following Dagan's death at the hands of Kestis and their return to Jedha, Cordova was able to repair the ancient compass, cementing the reunited Mantis crew in their quest to Tanalorr. However, while Cere and the Anchorites made preparations for the journey, their plan was thwarted when Bode turned on the Mantis crew, revealing their location to the Empire, killing Cordova in cold blood, and stealing the compass for himself. Cere, Merrin, and the Anchorites were left to defend the monastery against the oncoming Imperial assault, while Cal went after Bode, revealing himself as another Order 66 survivor fallen to the dark side. During their duel, Bode was able to knock Cal unconscious, allowing for his escape, while Cere faced off against Darth Vader, perishing at the hands of the Sith Lord, destroying her archive in the process, leaving Cal, Merrin, and Grease to continue the journey on their own. After tracing Bode's location back to a secret ISB base, Cal infiltrates the facility, locating Bode's living quarters, and retrieves a data disk from among his things. Cal also encounters Bode's daughter Kata, and eventually confronts his former ally, but the base is alerted of Cal's presence, allowing for Bode and Kata to escape among the chaos. Following the defeat, Cal discovers an old holo message from Santari Khri on the data disk, detailing the final way to reach Tanalorr. By aligning the 3 arrays between Kobo's surface and the shattered moon to the coordinates contained in the data disk, it will create a safe path through the Kobo Abyss. So after traveling back to Kobo and aligning the arrays, the Mantis crew begins their journey to the hidden planet. After narrowly making it through the abyss, the Mantis crew descends onto Tanalorr to confront Bode once and for all inside the abandoned Jedi temple. Cal is eventually able to best Bode with the help of Merrin, and after an excruciating fight between the two, Bode is finally killed and cremated on the planet along with the bodies of Jedi Master Cere Junda and Eno Cordova. After returning to their ship, Cal, Merrin, Grease, and the now orphaned Kata agreed to continue Cere's legacy, vowing to bring the Hidden Path to Tanalorr. Following the end of Jedi Survivor, the history of the Hidden Path is uncharted. However, I believe we've seen hints of the path's continuation through the series Tales of the Empire. In episode 6 of the series, titled The Way Out, we're introduced to a family on the run with a Force-sensitive child, seeking out a mysterious person known as the Healer for help. The identity of the healer is revealed to be former Jedi Knight Barriss Offee, who offers the family guidance, informing them of their child's Force sensitivity and how such gifts are now regarded as a sickness, sharing her own similar story of being discovered by the Jedi Order of old prior to the reign of the Empire. After sensing a dark presence approaching, Barriss instructs her attendants to take the family and flee the planet in her starship to coordinates programmed into the ship's computer. But when the family questions where they're being taken, Barriss answers to see an old friend. She'll understand what to do. The dark presence arrives shortly after, revealing themselves as an Imperial Inquisitor that was sent after the child, but is unable to reach the family after chasing after them into an ice cave. The timeline of the episode takes place between 9 BBY and 0 BBY, so while Barriss may not be directly involved with the hidden path, she seems to be in contact with someone who is. When she said the line, "to see an old friend," my mind immediately went to Ahsoka Tano, though as far as we know, Ahsoka was never canonically involved with the hidden path, so who else could Barriss be referring to? I actually think the old friend she's referring to could be Asajj Ventress. Now you might say Ventress and Barriss were never friends, they were actually enemies, which is true from a certain point of view. But who's to say that they never crossed paths again after their duel at the end of the Clone Wars Season 5? After Barriss deserted the Inquisitorius, she too would be considered a Jedi survivor, or at the very least, a member of the Empire's most wanted list, and I imagine this is how she would get in contact with the Hidden Path Network, and more specifically, Ventress. While these characters never had much of a relationship, they still have a history with one another and similarities in both of their pasts. Both Barriss and Ventress lost their way, worked through their own traumas, and found redemption, which is exactly what I believe would connect the two of them. I could also see Barriss entrusting Ventress specifically to get the family to safety, as a lot of Ventress's redemption journey has revolved around helping young, helpless, or otherwise impressionable beings escape a similar fate to her own, with characters like Pluma Sadi in the Clone Wars, Laylee and Vrom Krim in Dark Disciple, Lyko Strata in Tales of the Underworld, and Omega in The Bad Batch. So where does Tanalorr fit into all of this, and will we ever see the planet again? The story of the Hidden Path has been slowly building since 2022 from its introduction in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which then tied into the 2023 game Jedi Survivor, and most recently in 2025 with Tales of the Underworld. Over the past 3 years, Star Wars media has been dropping new bits of lore about the Hidden Path leading up to the discovery of Tanalorr, and the post-credit scene in Jedi Survivor makes it pretty clear that the path is heading to the planet. But what does the future of the Hidden Path look like? I believe Tanalorr is to the Hidden Path what Yavin is to the Rebel Alliance, an official headquarters or base of operations. Throughout the series Star Wars Rebels, we watched the separate rebel cells eventually come together when they were ready and the time was right to face the Empire head on. And I think we're going to see a similar story play out with the Hidden Path in Star Wars media. We've already seen different factions of the Path go up against the Empire to varying degrees, but Tanalorr is where it all comes together. Star Wars storytelling has been heavily criticized in recent years for the amount of new Order 66 survivors they've introduced across Star Wars media, but tying these characters' stories to the story of the Hidden Path would make Jedi survival past the Purge all the more plausible. This could also be a perfect way to tell new stories leading into the original trilogy era without having to directly compete or overlap with the story of the Rebellion, while also telling new, unique stories in a familiar era and beyond. The major difference between the Hidden Path and the Rebel Alliance, though, is their enemy. While the Path serves to stand against the Empire, the Imperial military is not their main antagonist. The true enemy of the Hidden Path is the dark side, the Inquisitorius, Darth Vader, and even Darth Sidious. Not only is the dark side a direct threat to the Path as an organization, but also to the very people they're trying to protect, Force sensitives. While the Inquisitor's main focus is to hunt down all Jedi survivors, not all of their targets are eliminated. Some survivors are spared and given a choice to join the Inquisitorius, while others are simply tortured into servitude or killed. The dark side promises power without limitations, to the point where the only real thing a darksider is scared of is losing that power, while at the same time, the dark side is also a prison. Palpatine knows this and exploits this within all of his dark side subordinates, but he's also no exception, and that's exactly why he's absolutely ruthless when it comes down to maintaining his power. Palpatine will do anything to make sure he keeps his power and maintains control. First, by eliminating any survivors of the Jedi Purge, but then to the extreme, ordering Vader and the Inquisitorius to hunt down innocent, Force-sensitive children. Palpatine is basically trying to rid the galaxy of the light, and that is exactly what the Hidden Path is trying to protect and preserve. The Inquisitorius as an organization is also something that Star Wars storytelling has been building up since Season 1 of Star Wars Rebels in 2014, and most recently in Tales of the Underworld in 2025. The Inquisitors, along with the Fortress Inquisitorius, even made the jump from animated animation into live action for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series in 2022, and their stories are something I don't expect to see stop anytime soon. We've even gotten some more Inquisitor-centric stories recently, like with the second sister, Trilla Suduri in the game Jedi Fallen Order, third sister, Reva Savander in the Kenobi series, and the 13th sister, Iskat Akaris in the book Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. Tales of the Empire also peeled back the curtain on the Inquisitorius, giving us a peek behind the scenes through the eyes of both Barriss Offee and the fourth sister, Lyn Rakish. But similarly to the Jedi Survivors, Star Wars fans have criticized the amount of new Inquisitors introduced across Star Wars media in recent years, with new members just being created whenever a story calls for a Force-sensitive antagonist. And these lesser-known Inquisitors could really benefit from further exploration, and no setting feels more perfect than within future Hidden Path stories. Imagine seeing a final battle between the Jedi Survivors of the Hidden Path and the Inquisitorius led by Darth Vader on Tanalorr. Unfortunately, both group stories have to come to an end at some point, and this final battle could serve as a perfect bookend to the original Nihil invasion on Tanalorr during the High Republic era that forced the Jedi Council to give up on the planet in the first place. So where will we see the Hidden Path next? The most obvious place would be in Jedi 3, the third entry in the Star Wars Jedi games, following Fallen Order and Survivor. I could see the beginning of Jedi 3 catching up with the Mantis crew and the Hidden Path's operations on Tanalorr, similar to the buildup of Yavin we saw in Andor Season 2, though I don't expect it to be the main focus of whatever story Jedi 3 is trying to tell. In my opinion, the perfect place to tell the story of the Hidden Path is in an animated anthology series similar to the Clone Wars. There's just so much potential here. A series about the Hidden Path could be the ultimate Star Wars crossover between Star Wars animation with the Clone Wars, Tales of the Underworld, The Bad Batch, Rebels, and Tales of the Empire, live action with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and also the Star Wars video games with Fallen Order and Survivor, as well as a chance to bring in so many fan-favorite characters in an anthology series format. We could follow a few main characters like Quinlan Vos, Asajj Ventress, and Lyco Strata, well-known characters like Omega, Cal Kestis, Merrin, maybe even Barriss Offee or Ahsoka, and lesser-known characters like Tala Durith, Colin Roken, Haja Estri, Seer Junda, Eno Cordova, and even Reva, depending on the timeline the show would actually take place. I could even see a series about the Path including senators like Ryo Chuchi and clones as well. Since the announcement of The Bad Batch Season 3 as the series' final season and the reintroduction of Asajj Ventress into Star Wars canon, I've been speculating and theorizing that the next multi-season animated series from Lucasfilm would be an animated series about the Hidden Path. However, at Star Wars Celebration Japan, Lucasfilm announced Maul Shadow Lord, a brand new animated series following Maul as he rebuilds his criminal empire in the time between Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith and Episode 4 A New Hope. Fans at the Lucasfilm animation panel were also shown a teaser trailer for the series, including scenes of Maul confronting the first brother Marok, a new Verk Jedi survivor, and most surprisingly, Maul taking on a young Twi'lek apprentice. So clearly, Maul Shadow Lord is not going to be a show about the Hidden Path, but I do think it has the potential to include some tie-ins to the Path at the very least. Not only are the Inquisitorius aware of Maul, but Maul is also no friend to the Jedi, and the fact that Maul is going to be taking on a dark side apprentice of his own could serve as the connecting piece. From the footage shown at Celebration, it almost seems as though Maul rescues this Twi'lek character from a cell, and with this character being Force sensitive in a post-Order 66 galaxy, that would make them both a target of the Empire and someone who could benefit from the help of the Hidden Path. Could we see a situation where this Twi'lek character was attempting to contact the Path, but was found and captured by an Inquisitor, causing Maul to intervene? Imagine the tragedy of this young Force-sensitive character trying to survive in a post-Order 66 galaxy, looking for a place to just safely exist outside of the gaze of the Empire, only to be found by Maul instead of the Path. There's so much potential they can do with this character. However, I could also see a potential Path connection in this series through another character, once again, Asajj Ventress. Maul and Ventress actually have a lot of similarities. Aside from them both being Dathomirian, Maul and Ventress were taken away from their families as children, trained as Sith apprentices, but were then abandoned by their masters when they no longer had use for them. These two characters also have a history together between their relationships with Savage Opress, and even battling against each other in the Clone Wars Season 4. Plus, they both have connections to the Star Wars Underworld. Ventress could serve as a really great foil to Maul, and I would love to see them cross paths again, especially within this part of the timeline. I'm not expecting to see any Hidden Path connections in the series, or any big ones anyway, but I do still think it could work really well. There's definitely a lot of potential, and if we do get an animated Hidden Path series in the future, it'll most likely be a few years down the line after Maul Shadow Lord ends. But between now and then, the last thing I wanted to touch on is Quinlan Vos himself. We keep getting teases about Vos's involvement with the Path, but when are we actually going to see Vos working with the Path? While the Kenobi series name-dropped Vos, I assumed at the time it was just a throwaway line about a familiar Jedi whose fate was unknown post-Order 66. But not only did this line confirm that Vos survived the Purge, it also confirmed that he was still alive 10 years later and actively working with the Path. Fans of the book Dark Disciple know that Quinlan Vos and Obi-Wan were good friends, so hearing the name drop in the Kenobi series was a really fun Easter egg. However, once it was revealed that Ventress was brought back to life, many fans started questioning when we would finally get to see Vos and Ventress on screen together, assuming that she would join him working with the Path as well. Fast forwarding to May 2025, Tales of the Underworld not only showed us how Ventress was brought back to life, but also gave us our first ever look at the pair together on screen, including a brand new character model and voice for Vos. We know that Star Wars Animation loves to reuse assets in their projects, so it's rare that we see a brand new character model or redesign unless there are plans to use it again in the future. Our perfect example of this is Dryden Vos from Solo appearing in the Clone Wars Season 7. A brand new model was created of the character, yet we only saw him for a few seconds in the show. However, we now know we're most likely going to see Dryden Vos again in the Maul Shadow Lord series. So with that in mind, when are we going to see the new Quinlan Vos model again? Because there's no way they created a brand new model of the character for less than 5 minutes of screen time. Tales doubled down on Vos's involvement with the Path and suggested that he actually established the network, yet instead of being shown Vos's work with the Path, we've only been told about it. So where do you think we'll see the Hidden Path next, and with the introduction of Tanalorr, do you think that Lucasfilm is building to something much bigger for the future of the Hidden Path? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to follow me on social media at ScottyHolidaySW and on my podcast at WayseekersPod. As always, may the Force be with you.